On February 3, 2025, a significant diplomatic development unfolded between the United States and Mexico as Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum announced a one-month delay in the implementation of tariffs that had been threatened by U.S. President Donald Trump. This decision was part of a broader agreement aimed at addressing the pressing issues of drug trafficking, particularly fentanyl and illegal migration across the U.S. Mexico border. The announcement came shortly before the tariffs, which were set at 25%, were scheduled to take effect. In exchange for the tariff delay, President Sheinbaum committed to deploying 10,000 National Guard troops to the border to bolster efforts against the flow of fentanyl and undocumented migrants into the United States. The conversation that led to this agreement took place during a phone call between Sheinbaum and Trump, in which both leaders expressed optimism about future negotiations. Following the call, Trump described his conversation with Sheinbaum as very friendly and indicated that both sides would begin discussions led by high-level officials, including Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Secretary of Commerce Howard Lutnick. The U.S. also agreed to step up its measures to prevent the trafficking of firearms into Mexico, addressing a key concern for the Mexican government. The decision to pause the tariffs was met with relief in Mexico, where approximately 80% of the country's exports are directed towards the United States. The looming threat of a 25% tariff had raised alarm among Mexican businesses and government officials who feared the potential economic fallout. Many in Mexico viewed the deployment of troops as a proactive measure to address U.S. concerns about drug trafficking while simultaneously protecting their economic interests. Media reports noted that the agreement represented a significant shift in U.S.-Mexico relations, particularly in light of the ongoing fentanyl crisis in the United States, which has resulted in tens of thousands of overdose deaths each year. Sheinbaum highlighted Mexico's existing efforts to combat drug trafficking, including legislative measures aimed at curbing the production of fentanyl within its borders. However, the agreement also cast a shadow over U.S. Canada relations, as Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau faced similar tariffs from Trump. Trudeau had vowed to impose retaliatory tariffs on over $100 billion worth of U.S. goods, highlighting the potential for escalating trade tensions in North America. In summary, the one-month delay in tariffs and the deployment of Mexican troops to the border mark a temporary resolution to the rising trade tensions between the U.S. and Mexico. Both countries have committed to further negotiations aimed at addressing broader issues related to trade security and immigration, with the outcomes of these discussions likely to have significant implications for the economic and political landscape of North America in the years to come. The recent announcement by Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum and U.S. President Donald Trump regarding the one-month delay in tariffs, along with the deployment of 10,000 Mexican troops to the U.S. Mexico border, reveals several counterintuitive aspects about international trade and diplomacy. 1. Troop deployment as a trade negotiation tool. It is typically expected that military deployments are a measure of last resort or a sign of escalating conflict. However, in this situation, the deployment of troops is being used as a bargaining chip to delay tariffs. This flips the conventional understanding of military strength being primarily for deterrence or combat, showing that in some cases it can be leveraged for economic negotiations. 2. Tariffs as a negotiation tactic. The imposition of tariffs is often seen as a punitive measure against a nation for undesirable actions such as drug trafficking or illegal immigration. However, Trump's tariffs on Mexico were not just punitive, they were also a strategic tool for negotiation. The pause on tariffs following Sheinbaum's agreement to send troops suggests that tariffs can be more about negotiating leverage than genuine economic policy. This challenges the notion that tariffs are purely economic tools rather than instruments of diplomacy. 3. Economic impact overlooked. While the tariffs were set to impose a significant economic burden on Mexico, affecting about 80% of its exports to the U.S., the immediate relief from these tariffs was celebrated without fully addressing the underlying economic vulnerabilities. This relief may be short-lived, as both nations still faced the looming threat of tariffs returning after the one-month delay.
The sense of relief may be a deceptive short-term victory masking deeper economic dependencies and vulnerabilities.
For fentanyl crisis as a diplomatic leverage point, the framing of the fentanyl crisis as a reason for the troop deployment in tariff negotiations is counterintuitive. Drug trafficking is often viewed in terms of law enforcement and public health crises, but here it is being positioned as a central issue of national security that influences trade relations. This suggests that domestic issues like drug trafficking can be weaponized in international negotiations, altering their typical boundary between domestic policy and foreign relations. 5. Potential for retaliatory tariffs. The situation also brings to light the potential for retaliatory tariffs, particularly from Canada, which suggests that the interdependencies in trade relationships can create a cycle of escalation. The anticipation of Canada imposing 25% tariffs on over $100 billion worth of U.S. goods reflects a broader context in which tariffs do not just affect the target nation but can also rebound upon the initiator, complicating the overarching strategy. This illustrates how interconnected trade relationships can lead to unintended consequences, where one nation's economic measures can spiral into broader trade conflicts. 6. Public reaction and economic realities. While Mexican officials and citizens expressed relief at the tariff delay, there remains an underlying uncertainty about the future. The public's immediate response to the news may not fully capture the complexities of the economic and political landscape, where many businesses in Mexico depend heavily on U.S. markets.
This short-term relief might lead to complacency,
ignoring the potential for future economic instability if negotiations do not yield lasting solutions. 7. Negotiation dynamics. The agreement to pause tariffs for negotiations emphasizes a shift in how diplomatic negotiations are conducted. It illustrates a less formal and potentially less predictable negotiation atmosphere, where public social media announcements and informal conversations can lead to significant agreements. This challenges traditional diplomatic protocols and suggests a new era of negotiation tactics that rely on personal relationships and public declarations rather than formal treaties. In conclusion, the recent developments between Mexico and the United States exemplify a series of counterintuitive dynamics in trade and diplomacy. The interplay of military presence, economic strategy, and public perception highlights the complexities of international relations in a globalized context. These factors reveal that the traditional boundaries and assumptions about trade negotiations, military deployments, and economic policies may be shifting,
offering new insights into how nations navigate their intertwined fates. The recent announcement from Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum regarding a one-month delay in tariffs and the deployment of 10,000 troops to the U.S Mexico border is significant for several reasons that may be overlooked by the general populace. 1. Immediate economic impact on Mexico. One of the most critical elements of this agreement is the immediate economic relief it provides to Mexico. Approximately 80% of Mexico's exports go to the United States, making the threat of a 25% tariff a severe risk to its economy. While the media highlights the troop deployment and tariff pause, the underlying economic implications for Mexican businesses and consumers are profound. The tariffs not only threaten industrial sectors, particularly the automotive industry, but also agricultural exports like avocados and fruits, which are vital to Mexico's economy. The immediate relief from the threat of tariffs allows for a temporary stabilization of trade relations and fosters an environment for negotiation. 2. Strategic military cooperation. The deployment of 10,000 National Guard troops to the U.S. Mexico border is not just a gesture, it represents a shift in military cooperation that could have long-term implications for both nations' security policies. This move is specifically aimed at addressing the flow of fentanyl and illegal migrants, which are critical issues for the U.S.
The significance lies in how this cooperation may establish a framework for future U.S. Mexico security collaborations, potentially leading to shared intelligence and military resources. Such arrangements can enhance border security and reduce drug trafficking, which is increasingly a shared concern between the two countries.
3. Diplomatic dynamics with Canada.
while the focus is on U.S. Mexico relations.
The impact on Canada should not be underestimated.
Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's response to the U.S. tariffs, including plans for retaliatory tariffs against the U.S., highlights the precarious nature of North American trade relations.
The potential for a trade war between the U.S. and Canada could have cascading effects on the entire continent's economy.
The agreement between Trump and Sheinbaum might serve as a tactical pause in broader economic hostilities, and how Canada reacts will be crucial.
The ongoing negotiations could either stabilize or further complicate North American trade dynamics.
4. The drug trafficking crisis.
The urgency of addressing fentanyl trafficking is often overshadowed by economic discussions.
However, the agreement emphasizes the severity of the drug crisis in the U.S.,
where fentanyl is responsible for tens of thousands of overdose deaths annually.
This agreement could be seen as a critical turning point in bilateral efforts to combat drug trafficking. By framing the deployment of troops as a proactive measure against drug trafficking, Sheinbaum is also addressing domestic political pressures in Mexico, where drug-related violence is a significant concern. The long-term significance of this cooperation may lead to more comprehensive drug policy reforms in both countries.
5. Broader implications for U.S. domestic policy. The negotiation process initiated by this agreement could have broader implications for U.S. domestic policy.
The emphasis on security and trade in negotiations reflects President Trump's administration's priorities. If successful, these negotiations may pave the way for future domestic policies that prioritize border security and economic relations over traditional trade agreements.
The outcomes will be closely watched by various stakeholders, including businesses, labor unions, and political activists, each of whom may have differing perspectives on the issue.
6. Political ramifications.
Lastly, this agreement underscores the political dynamics at play.
Both Trump and Sheinbaum have a vested interest in presenting this deal as a success to their respective constituencies. For Trump, it reinforces his tough-on-immigration stance, while Sheinbaum can showcase her leadership in averting a potentially damaging economic crisis.
The political ramifications could shape future electoral dynamics in both countries, affecting everything from party platforms to voter mobilization efforts.
In summary, while the announcement of a tariff delay in troop deployment garners significant media attention, the nuanced implications, economic stability for Mexico's strategic military cooperation, the precarious balance of North American trade relations, the urgent drug crisis, potential shifts in U.S. domestic policy, and political ramifications are essential to understanding the broader context of this agreement. Overlooking these aspects could lead to a misinterpretation of its significance and impact on both nations and the region as a whole.
1. Economic implications of tariff delays. The one-month delay in tariffs imposed by the U.S. on Mexican goods is significant for the Mexican economy, which relies heavily on exports to the United States, approximately 80% of its exports. The threat of a 25% tariff had the potential to disrupt various sectors, including automotive, agriculture, and consumer goods. In the context of both nations' economies, this temporary pause allows for negotiations that could lead to a more stable and mutually beneficial trade relationship. The economic ramifications extend beyond Mexico, influencing U.S. industries that depend on cross-border supply chains, potentially leading to increased costs and job losses if tariffs are ultimately enacted.
2. Security concerns in drug trafficking. The agreement for Mexico to deploy 10,000 National Guard troops to the U.S. Mexico border specifically aims to combat the flow of fentanyl and illegal migrants into the U.S. This provision highlights the urgent need for collaborative efforts in addressing drug trafficking, which has been linked to a significant number of overdose deaths in the United States. The U.S. government attributes around 70,000 deaths annually to fentanyl, with most of it crossing through the southern border. The deployment of troops is framed as a proactive measure to enhance border security, reflecting a growing recognition of the intertwined nature of trade and security issues. 3. Bilateral relations and diplomatic dynamics. the negotiations between Presidents Sheinbaum and Trump indicate a potential shift in U.S. Mexico relations, marked by a cooperative approach to shared challenges. Both leaders expressed optimism about future discussions, suggesting a willingness to engage in diplomacy rather than resorting to punitive measures. This development has broader implications for North American unity, particularly in the context of trade and security. However, the situation is complicated by Canada's retaliatory tariffs against the U.S., which could further strain regional relations and create a more fragmented trade environment in North America. For impact on broader North American trade relations, the unfolding events also raise concerns about the implications for U.S. Canada relations, as Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau faces similar tariff threats and has indicated plans for retaliatory measures. This scenario poses a risk of escalating trade tensions across North America, potentially leading to a trade war that could have detrimental effects on all three countries involved. The interconnectedness of their economies means that instability in one area can have ripple effects throughout the region, influencing everything from consumer prices to investment strategies. As negotiations progress, the outcomes will likely shape the future landscape of trade and diplomatic relations in North America. 1. The tariff dispute between the U.S. and China 2018-present. In 2018, the U.S. under President Trump imposed significant tariffs on Chinese imports, triggering a trade war between the two countries. The tariffs were originally justified by the U.S. government as a means to combat China's unfair trade practices and to protect American jobs. China retaliated with its own tariffs on U.S. goods, leading to escalating tensions and negotiations. Over the years, various agreements were reached, including the Phase 1 trade deal in January 2020, which aimed to ease some of the tariffs and increase Chinese purchases of U.S. goods. 2. The North American Free Trade Agreement NAFTA negotiations 1992 to 1994. NAFTA, implemented in 1994, was a significant trade agreement between the U.S., Canada, and Mexico aimed at eliminating trade barriers and promoting economic cooperation. In the years leading up to its implementation, there were extensive negotiations and discussions, particularly concerning labor standards, environmental protections, and trade imbalances. The agreement faced criticism and calls for renegotiation, particularly from U.S. labor unions and politicians who argued it led to job losses in the manufacturing sector. In 2018, NAFTA was replaced by the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement USMCA after significant renegotiation. 3. The 2019 U.S. Mexico-Canada Agreement USMCA negotiations. Following the contentious negotiations surrounding NAFTA, the USMCA was negotiated and signed by the leaders of the U.S., Mexico, and Canada in November 2018. The agreement aimed to address modern trade issues such as digital trade, intellectual property rights, and labor and environmental standards. The negotiations were marked by intense discussions over tariffs, agricultural access, and labor rights, reflecting the complexities of trade relations in North America. The USMCA was seen as a crucial step in reshaping trade dynamics between the three countries and was ultimately ratified by Congress in January 2020. These historical cases share similarities with the recent agreement between President Sheinbaum and President Trump involving negotiations, tariffs, and cross-border security concerns. The recent agreement between Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum and U.S. President Donald Trump marks a pivotal moment in U.S.-Mexico relations, reflecting both immediate economic concerns and broader geopolitical implications. As the situation unfolds, several predictions can be made about the future outlook for North America trade relations and security issues. 1. Short-term economic stability. The one-month delay in tariffs provides immediate economic relief for Mexico, whose economy is highly dependent on exports to the U.S. Approximately 80% of Mexican exports go to its northern neighbor, making the potential imposition of a 25% tariff a significant threat to its economy. This pause will allow Mexican businesses to stabilize and prepare for negotiations, ultimately preventing a sharp economic downturn in the short term. However, the looming threat of tariffs will likely keep the Mexican economy on edge. The Sheinbaum administration may intensify its efforts to demonstrate commitment to combating drug trafficking and illegal migration as these issues remain critical to avoiding future tariffs. 2. Increased military presence at the border. The deployment of 10,000 Mexican National Guard troops to the U.S. Mexico border is a significant step in addressing drug trafficking, particularly fentanyl, which has contributed to a public health crisis in the U.S. This military presence is expected to have an immediate impact on reducing the flow of illegal substances across the border. In the long term, this military cooperation could lead to more integrated security measures between the two countries, potentially resulting in joint operations or intelligence sharing aimed at combating organized crime. Such actions may also reshape public perception of Mexico's role in border security, framing it as a proactive partner rather than a source of the problem. 3. Negotiation dynamics. The next month will be crucial for negotiations between the U.S. and Mexico. High-level representatives from both sides, including Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Secretary of Commerce Howard Lutnick, will be tasked with addressing trade and security issues. The success or failure of these negotiations will likely set the tone for U.S.-Mexico relations moving forward. If negotiations yield positive results, it could lead to a more stable and cooperative relationship, potentially avoiding future tariff threats. Conversely, failure to reach an agreement could reignite tensions, prompting both sides to adopt more aggressive stances. 4. Implications for Canada. The agreement between the U.S. and Mexico may have unintended consequences for Canada. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has already indicated plans for retaliatory tariffs against the U.S. in response to the recent tariff announcements. This situation could escalate into a broader trade conflict in North America. As Canada feels sidelined, it may seek to strengthen trade ties with other countries, potentially looking towards Europe or Asia for new partnerships. This shift could realign trade patterns in North America, leading to a more fragmented economic landscape. 5. Long-term drug policy revisions. Given the ongoing drug crisis in the U.S., the agreement emphasizes the need for comprehensive drug policy reforms. Both nations may pursue more coordinated anti-drug strategies, focusing not only on border enforcement but also on tackling the root causes of drug trafficking, such as poverty and lack of opportunity in Mexico. In the longer term, this could lead to legislative changes in both countries, focusing on public health approaches to drug addiction in the U.S. and economic development initiatives in Mexico to reduce the appeal of drug trafficking. 6. Political ramifications. The agreement may have significant political implications for both leaders. For Sheinbaum, demonstrating a strong response to U.S. pressures may bolster her domestic standing, especially if she can effectively address drug trafficking and immigration concerns. 4. Trump. Successfully negotiating a deal could enhance his image as a strong leader capable of managing U.S. foreign relations. However, both leaders will face pressure from their constituents to deliver tangible results. Any perceived failure to address these issues effectively could lead to political backlash. 7. Potential for broader regional cooperation. If the U.S. and Mexico can navigate this current crisis successfully, it may open the door for broader regional cooperation on various issues, including trade, security, and climate change. Enhanced collaboration could lead to the development of joint initiatives that benefit both countries and potentially include Canada in future discussions. Conclusion. In summary, the agreements made between President Sheinbaum and President Trump represent a temporary resolution to immediate challenges but also set the stage for ongoing negotiations with far-reaching implications. The effectiveness of these negotiations will determine the future of U.S.-Mexico relations and could reshape the economic and political landscape of North America. The next few months will be critical in determining whether this cooperation can lead to a more stable and prosperous future for both nations, or whether underlying tensions will resurface once again.